Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to do some pruning and a couple other things that need to be done here in the garden. We put up some videos several months ago, right at the end of winter, just doing some pruning that could be done in the late winter. But all of the early flowering shrubs, like the Viburnum, azaleas, there's a lot of things that bloom early in the season. They can't be pruned at that time. They typically get pruned after they flower. So that's the things we're going to concentrate on in this video. Plus, we've got some things that we've tree formed that need to be cleaned up. We've got some perennials that are coming back as bullies in the garden that need to be cleaned up. So we're going to show you several different things that need to be pruned or cleaned up or dug out or whatever as we go. I've got all kinds of implements of destruction. I've got all kinds of different pruners and saws and everything else. This Viburnum I actually grew at my nursery, and Steph really likes this plant, and it looks great out here, but it gets so wide. We're on such a tiny lot here that this thing, we're struggling to garden with it because it wants to get 10 or 12 feet wide and right down to the ground. And so what I'm going to do in this video is attempt to limit up a bit. I've done some pretty radical pruning on the top of it, and it's just going to be impossible to have it bloom well every year, because these don't take that well to pruning from the top down. It takes them a couple years to get going again, flowering. So that technique is really just not great. It limits the amount of flowers you're going to get. So what I'm going to do instead is do the different technique of just limbing it up, and then we'll just be able to plant right under it. So let's see how this goes. I've got one crazy limb over here to the left, and of course if I lift this up I'll find 100 maples, because the neighbor's maple is crazy. And here's a liriope that somehow escaped me. We'll be able to clean this stuff up once I do this. There's one limb that just goes off to the left over here that I'm going to take completely out. So I'm going to saw the back of it a bit right there, and then get it from the other side. It should break off pretty clean. Okay. All right, this is going to be pretty radical. This video may be ruined on the first cut I've made. We'll see. Okay, how does that look? It's not bad, is it? It's not bad at all. Okay, good. I didn't know that was such a big piece to start with. You never know. Have I ruined it? Well, so now really I just want to go under here and get anything that's, less than maybe 2 feet off the ground. And I'm just going to use my bypass loppers for this. If there's a bigger limb here, I've got a bigger pair of bypass loppers for it. So that's a pretty major cut. Anything that's coming out sideways on it. And I always get a few suckers on this thing that just come from the ground and grow all the way up through the top. I'll clean those up as I go too. It's a 6 foot tall sucker up in the middle of it. So there we go. That's that side pretty much. And then same thing over here. Any horizontal branching that's low, we'll take it off without damaging the main stem here. I'm doing this pretty fast. I'll probably come back in here and clean these up, get them cut a little closer to the trunk. I'll do that now, actually. There you go. Using sharp tools for these types of jobs, super important. Okay, what do we need to do here? Probably need to stand back and take a look at it. There's a couple sticking straight out the back I need to get. And then I'll probably go ahead and take, there's a couple lower ones here or there. Any that are going back toward the middle. So this thing has 3 trunks now. If there's something that I can see that's just crossing right through the middle and rubbing another branch, there's one right here doing that, but it's actually the one it's sitting on that probably should go right there. Okay, all right. Now, should this one go right here? Yes. Okay, all right. Steph can see better than I can without me stepping out. Okay, so I think, should this one go? Maybe, okay. Okay, all right, I got a no on that one. Okay, I see another one crossing right there. Might as well go ahead and get that while we're in here, because it's just going to cause damage to the plant. But let's stand back with the camera and take a look at it now. All right, completely different plant, really. Now I think we can save this and allow it to get bigger up here in the top. I might bring it up just a bit more next year And that's all I'll do on it for now. But see what a difference that actually made. And there's a distilleum right down below it. This distilleum is, this thing got hurt. It actually, I had a cover on it during the December freeze and it didn't get hurt. But it got ahead of itself about 3 weeks ago and started to grow and then got a little bit of damage. So I'm just gonna clean this one up. This is, you know, a plant that you can just go through and cut the dead off the top of it and move on with your day. If you want to get in here and get precise and, you know, cut it right along a node or a branch or something like that, that's fine. But with this distilleum, I just treat it like a holly or some, you know, really tough, rugged plant and cut it and move on with your day. All these small little pieces I just cut off of it, they're just mulching it. I'm not even gonna clean them up. We're about to mulch the entire garden. It'll just get mulched over then. This one's pretty interesting. This is a Cestrum parqui, and it's really a woody shrub or a small tree. But in our area, the freeze kills them to the ground and then they come back up in the spring. If I let all of these branches grow all season, and there's probably 20, maybe more than 20, it's going to fight for resources, fight for nutrients, fight for water, and none of them are going to excel, okay? And so this will get up probably in the 7-8 foot range before the season is over, and it'll bloom with these yellow flowers that the hummingbirds absolutely love. This is invasive somewhere, in some places on, you know, like Australia, I understand it's super invasive, but here, winter completely controls it. It just comes back from the roots in the spring, and it doesn't seed itself. None of the seeds are viable because of the cold weather. What I want to do is just get this down to 5, 6, 7 branches, something like that, and I'm just going to pick some of these vigorous ones to keep. And this is just a hand pruner job. As long as I'm doing this early enough in the season, I just go down here to the bottom and cut them off. I can stake this if I wanted to make, you know, make sure they're shaped like I want to shape them. But I'll go through here and just grab 2 and 3 at the time. But don't be scared to prune things like this. This is one of those situations where you're looking at this going, wow, it's coming back, it's super healthy. Wow, I can't believe it. But if you have this much material, it's just not going to respond. You know, it just doesn't have enough nutrients to work with. This is actually a very good one, but it's way over on the edge. So I'm gonna cut it down. I'm going all the way around. I may have to do this again. There's a few other small ones down in the bottom, and literally I'm just taking a pair of pruners and cutting this off. This material is so soft that I'm just gonna, again, this is another thing. I can take these and, you know, cut them into a few pieces and then put my mulch right over the top of them when we mulch. So there you go. And again, I think I'm gonna have to come back around to this later. There's a few other pieces here that are gonna try to come up from my cuts even. That's what happened last year, but eventually they got tired of it, and I just had, let's see, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. So I'm gonna prune this short one out of the middle. Give them a little bit more space. That's the one I'll prune. Okay, there you go. That's what I'm gonna leave. So I reduced it dramatically, but it's going to thank me for it later. It's gonna definitely produce more flowers, be more of a vigorous grower for us. It's tucked back in here and I need it to get 8 feet to be able to see it from anywhere else in the garden. Sometimes we prune things to actually protect the plants. This is a single trunked Rosalinda Indian Hawthorne, and the trunk on it is only about 1.5 inches diameter, maybe 2 inches right down at the base, at the ground. And it's got a ton of growth on the top of it. I think if I got any kind of really strong wind, a strong thunderstorm, this plant would be in trouble during this growing season. So I need to basically reduce the weight on the top of it until this thing in the future can really support it. But I can actually grab this and shake it all the way down to the base pretty easily. So again, just fearing that something is gonna happen to this one if I don't do this. This one I'm gonna be a little bit more exacting. I can come along the stem and just see if there's any kind of buds, you know, behind these leaves where, you know, I know I'll get growth. And on this one, because it had already been pruned last year right there and has this piece coming on the side of it, I'm actually just gonna take this one completely off. You see that? And that way, you know, again, I'm just trying to reduce the weight on it. So that's what I'll go back and do, is where I pruned it last year in the main branch that came from that, I'm going to take it completely back off, and the kind of sub branches that formed later in the season, those are the ones I'm going to keep. And so this is a pretty easy process. Let's show them again, stuff right here. So last year, I pruned this back here, all the way back there. I got this side piece to come on it right there, and then I got this long, really long piece, you know, long stem of growth, which actually flowered this spring. It had flowers right there. They're finished up now. And then later in the season, got a couple little more side branches on it. I'm just gonna take this back right there to where those side branches are. Next, I've got an interesting one. I'm always looking when I'm pruning these things at branches that are rubbing. And you can see how this thing's gonna go all season long. Those two branches are gonna rub on one another. In fact, I can already see a little bit of damage on that larger one right there. And I'm gonna decide here that I may actually take this one off, this really tall one. And again, I'm cutting it down to where there's 3 smaller branches, just like I just did that other one. I probably need a slightly larger tool than what I'm using right there. That was not a good call on my part. I probably should use something a little larger than a hand pruner once you get to this big. The packaging on this will tell me I can cut something this big, but I'm definitely dulling my pruners by cutting something that big. So just pointing that out. If there's really resistance and you're having to, you know, put a lot of effort into it like I just did, that's when it's time to go get a bigger tool out of the shed. Here's another one that I'm just gonna cut back to the main branch like that. Okay. Same thing with this one, just like that. And then I'm just gonna go around and keep doing that same thing. I'm cutting off the larger of the branches back, this one, way back. And then this thing's got such sparse growth on it, it's kind of hard to make decisions here. How are we looking, Steph? I may actually take this thing back to here, huh? I'll do that. It'll branch out from there. And I'm gonna do the same thing here, actually. It just needs to be reduced. This is one of those, you know, the rare times that I'm actually thinking less about, you know, the overall, you know, the shape and the I'm just trying to reduce the weight because I know this plant is actually in a bit of trouble. This one that's coming back toward the middle, definitely want to get rid of right there. And then I need to get rid of this one for sure. I've reduced the height of it now, probably 1.5 to 2 feet, something like that. There's another one. Any damaged branches from the freeze, definitely on the list of things to take off of it. Neighboring plants are gonna thank me too, because the thing's trying to get so wide. Okay, maybe a couple there in the front. How's it look, Steph? Okay, good. And then another one right here where, again, I've got the long branch that's come out, but I have a side branch down a little further into the plant, and you make that cut and you can't even tell I made that cut. Those are the ones I'm really looking for. So I think that's all I'm gonna do on it. I've substantially reduced the weight of the top of it, and I'll let Steph come around here and film the back of it, and you can see, you know, what I'm talking about the undersized trunk. You won't be able to see me back in here. Last year we limbed up this Miss Kim lilac, similar to what I did in the Shasta Viburnum at the beginning of the video. Anytime you're making those kind of cuts down at the bottom, this is gonna be the result. You're gonna get all this suckering taking place down here. So within the realm of possibility, because it's got a big opening in the middle, that I'm just gonna leave a couple of these, but the rest of them I just need to cut right down to the ground and clean them up. But we are able now to tuck things right up under this plant. And I'm gonna have to do this in the future too. It's, you know, once you put light under here like this, it's got the ability to grow. And again, I think I'm gonna leave 1 or 2 of these right in the center. You have that choice to leave a couple. And that's what I'll do right there. And then I'm gonna take a look. It did open up some in the middle, which again, I'll leave these to grow in there and fill it out. And then because it opened up a bit and leaned down some, I need to come in here and take some weight off the bottom of a couple of these in order to allow these to stand back up a bit. But anything that's low down here, I'm trying to get, these are shade plants going under it. They need some light. They need some light for sure. And so this is just basically a cleanup job this year after more of a heavy pruning on it last year. Again, this is another plant that doesn't like top pruning. If I went in here and hacked this thing way down to reset it, it would take a few years for it to come back around. If there's any dead branches or anything rubbing, anything that's coming back toward the middle, anything that's crossing another branch, this is a great example right there. You probably won't be able to see it, but there's a little side branch on this one is coming up and rubbing the one above it, so it needs to get out of there. So I think that's it, but I'm actually leaving a couple here just because I'm going to let them come up into the middle of it because there is a big opening right at the top. When we filmed this last year, it was exactly like that Shasta Viburnum. It was limbed right down to the ground. And now again, we've just lifted its skirt up to, you know, maybe 3.5 feet. We've got epimedium, hellebores, other shade perennials, ajuga, and other things are able now to just grow right up under it. And it looks great like this. And it flowered beautifully a few weeks ago. The spent flowers are on it now, but plant's looking great. This is another plant that also likes good air movement, so I'm probably helping with that as well. Dry leaves out. If it was just piled leaf on leaf on leaf on leaf all the way to the ground, the dew would stay on the leaves longer. It'd be more susceptible to powdery mildew, that kind of thing. So I think I'm also helping it in that way. This Viburnum macrocephalum, or Chinese snowball, is really quite awkward. It was a little 1 gallon, and I've talked about many times, most of these shrubs, I'm 100% in control of how it's ultimately going to look. And I just let the thing grow as just this thing. And I ultimately want it to be a tree form. So I should have started on it much earlier. I've got one main upright stem right here that I'm going to stake straight and then cut this off right about there, let these side branches come on it. And this is going to ultimately be the tree. Not going to do that today. I'm just going to try to get some of the lower branching off of it and get it to the point where I can do that. And then I think I'm going to shoot a separate video on how to tree form this Chinese snowball or anything. You know, like I say, most of these things you're in 100% control of. I can control where the branches are going to come and every bit of it. I've got that in a couple other videos on the channel. But this one, in the meantime, it's got limbs coming out on the sidewalk over here. Those are going to need to go. And so I'm going to just clean up. I've got one branch that's trying to grow over here to the neighbor's house. We'll get rid of that. It's just wider than I want it. All this bottom stuff's ultimately going to come off anyway, and so I'll go ahead and clean it up now. And already, here's the one flower we had on it. The December cold snap prevented it from doing a whole lot of flowering. So all I've done here is just get some control over it. I'm going to take this bottom branches off of it that are going out sideways. There's one right there. There's one. I think I'll go ahead and take that off. And you'll think I butchered this thing, and I kind of have. But ultimately, I'm going to stake that straight up, just like that, and it's going to be a tree form. And I'll show you that in a separate video once it gets a little bit more growth on it. As Steph said, we've gone tree form crazy out here because of our small space. We're limbing things up and allowing this Weigela back here and the Salvia a place where they can have plenty of sunlight. The Sakuba back here, which likes shade, but not as much shade as this Vitex was actually going to give it. So in a video last year, we limbed this thing up into a tree. It's going to bloom beautifully out here. And again, is when you make these major cuts down here at the bottom of these things, this is what you get. You get all this material right here coming back, and it's just taking energy from the tree. So we go in here and clean it up and just neaten it back up again. Some of those cuts I made last year, I didn't come back and clean them completely up, and that's where a lot of this growth is coming from. And so that's what I need to do, is come in here with a saw and saw some of those things off a bit closer. Any of these little side shoots on here can be either popped off or cut off, however you want to do that. But all this material just needs to be cleaned up. It's just taking energy. Crepe myrtles are bad for this. Any kind of top pruning you do on a crepe myrtle, you know, you'll get tons of this kind of material down at the bottom, and they just need to be cleaned up because they will take energy from the rest of the plant and what the plant's trying to do. Also a good place, really, really good place for insects to hide that might not be attacking the plant that it's hiding in, but it's a spot where they can hide and do damage to other plants that are in your garden. You know, this will be a great hiding place for slugs and that kind of thing. But there you go, just going through and cleaning it up. Any of the branches that I left in place last year, you know, this was a major cut I made. That's where this material is coming from. I didn't take this one as clean as I should have. That's where a lot of that growth is coming from. A branch back here that I didn't cut all the way to the ground, a lot of that growth is coming from. So I'm gonna bring the saw and just clean those up a bit better. And I think that'll reduce some of it, but I'm still gonna get that suckering on a tree form like this. I just am. Once a year, I can come over here and clean it up. And if I wasn't talking to the camera, it would have taken seconds to do and I'd have moved on with my day. Next up is this Wheeler's Dwarf Pittosporum. I've already started cutting on it. It had gotten much wider than we want to keep it, but that's the growth habit of Wheeler's Dwarf Pittosporum. It only gets about 2.5 feet tall and about 4 feet wide. Great plant in a part shade condition. We've got a variegated one back here called Mojo Pittosporum, has a similar growth habit. All I do on these is just on these mounding low plants is I just go straight down like this and cut them, you know, literally just straight down, kind of an angle, you know, a little bit of an angle down to the ground. And then I clear out the material that I feel like I've cut off, and then I'll find that I haven't cut it, everything, and I'll cut those. And that's it. That's my whole technique. This one has grown right up into the peonies next to it, and so I want to be careful when I get over there. But I'm not really thinking about where I'm cutting this plant. It's well established. It'll just come right back out of this. I can take a little bit of this height out as well. Allow some light down into the center of it because I got a little bit of a couple thin spots in here. So if I do that, I'll get a little bit more light in it. Again, these peonies are problematic, so I'm going to get some hand pruners for that side. Just still hunting top to bottom, so I'm just going to cut them at an angle, going top to bottom until I've gotten every piece all the way to the ground. Again, I'll take these kind of curved dome plants and I'll stand the opposite side of them and prune them down at that angle to keep that basic rough shape. Same thing going back the other direction like that, and same thing on this side. And I'll go back to this side and go that direction, just like that. And I keep basically the same exact shape. And initially it'll look like I butchered it a bit, but it's back in same exact shape it was in when I started, just a much smaller version. It'll take this space back really quickly this spring. If I didn't do this, it'd be way over here by the end of this spring. It'd be destroying the peonies, destroying the barberry here. So looks good, I think. This sedum that we planted down below, this windmill palm, is just out of control. In fact, I think I'm ultimately probably going to remove it. It just grows so fast. It grows all winter. It grows all summer. It grows all every day. It seems like this thing is growing. It's eaten the lemon coral sedum that was with it. It was this really nice green and yellow together. Not anymore. It's spread up into the camellia back here, over here into this loropetalum. It's everywhere. And so ultimately, I'm going to cut it back right now and show you how I would just typically come in and control these aggressive ground covers, but ultimately I think this needs to go away. This windmill palm has a little bit of tattered fronds on it from that cold damage. It probably has a couple more that ultimately need to come off, but got those out of the way. And I'll just take a shovel on something like this, and if this is where I want it, I'll just go through with the shovel and just cut it right down to the ground, just like that. And then this stuff, you know, there's a pansy right there that it is eating. This little piece right here would take over your entire garden. It likes these moist conditions. This spot happens to be moist, and it just absolutely thrives in it. But I'll have to be careful how I dispose of it, because it will, any place I put it that's moist, it'll try to grow. And so this is all I do, is cut an edge and then come back in here and get it. This sedum, I don't have to dig down very deep to get most of the roots on it, but I am probably leaving a little bit. I'll just monitor it, come back over here and cut it out if I need to. But you can see, I mean, man, is this stuff ever aggressive. I'm just gonna kind of scrape some of it off. A bit of it's gonna try to come back from the roots in this area. but I don't want to dig down. Try not to kill that pansy yet. This pansy season's almost over for us. Unfortunately, never really started this year because of the cold weather. But I got it back here in bulbs. I've got it in just everywhere. It's under this loropetalum. Most of it comes up, you know, pretty easily. I'm gonna leave some roots. I'll just have to cut it off again, trying not to damage things too badly as I'm doing this, and I'm trying to not have it take me 2 days to accomplish. There's a delicate balance there, right? But I am chopping down, trying to break the roots off pretty deep. Okay. But look at this. This is in these bulbs, and I don't want to tear these bulbs up yet. So pulled that one up, got all the root on that. Okay. All right, but that's the basics of it. It's just, again, I think it just it ultimately needs to go away. It's made it much further up in here than even I had seen until we started shooting this. But it comes up pretty easy. It's not the worst thing. I've definitely had spreading things that are much worse than this. And I'll just monitor this space over the next week or two, see if anything else tries to come up, and I'll just chop it off. Just chop it off right in place. Next up on the bully list is this Rhythm and Blues Salvia. It's just completely and totally ridiculous how much this thing spreads in a single winter. It's one of the hummingbird's favorite plants, but it just has gone wild. It's up in this ligustrum, hydrangea paniculata. This white wedding hydrangea now has a salvia right in the middle of it. So this thing just is so aggressive. It's another one I'm likely going to end up getting rid of it. The plant's great, the hummingbirds love it, but you know, every season you're going to do this. It's a bit much. I'm going to, you know, when you dig these out, you know, all I have to do is stick the shovel in the ground and I can easily pop one of these sections out. This is another plant. It's got the roots and everything on it. You can give this to a friend, plant it into another place. You might turn your friend into an enemy with the amount of work they're gonna have to do to maintain the salvia. Make sure if you do have something that's aggressively spreading in your garden, even if you like it, it might not be something that, you know, they're gonna like, you know, if it's spreading around a bit. So this one will come with a warning. I'll give them away if somebody wants them, but again, it does need to come with a warning. It blooms all summer, but I'll go through and just right up underneath these, they really dig up very easily. And you got to get the root though on these. That's what you need to see. Otherwise, this thing's just coming right back up. I didn't have to cut that deep on that sedum. I've taken enough sedum out in the past that, you know, it's got a fairly shallow fibrous root system, and you can get 90% of it just like that. But these, I really do have to get down in there and get these roots up. Look at this. Look at how aggressive the roots are in here. It's just crazy. It's absolutely wild how aggressive this thing actually is. And don't need that out here at all. So I'll take and like this, and I'll just keep peeling it back until I get it where I want it to keep it, and then I'll stop right there. But look at that big chunk. All the roots and everything came up with that one. Man, this thing is good at storing energy through the winter and then invading everything else's space early in the season. Wow, grows so crazy. But I gotta get it away from these other plants. It won't spread anymore this year. What I leave behind will be pretty well behaved for the rest of this season, but when it goes to sleep next year, it'll do this exact same thing again. So just trying to leave pieces in the middle here, which that's good right there. But I gotta get under here. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna clean the rest of this up, try to get as much of the root system as I can. This year, I'm gonna let it grow, enjoy it. Hummingbirds will enjoy it. And then I think I'm not gonna let it go through another winter and do this again. It's just too aggressive. I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the early spring flowering things, this is the time to be pruning them. The loropetalum has just finished flowering. I don't really need to do any pruning on it. The osmanthus back here blooms in the winter time, and it would be time to prune on it if I needed to prune on it. But any of your super early flowering things, if they've already flowered and they need a bit of a haircut, now's the time to do it. These encore azaleas, I've got 3 different encore azaleas. One's in a container. It's actually going to go in the ground or be part of another project pretty soon. But these are in a little more shade than they want. One thing about encore azaleas is they need a little bit more sun than traditional azaleas. And so these are, again, in a little bit too much shade and it's stretching them a bit. You can go in here and be ultra precise and, and cut back to a bud on these, but I've cut a lot of azaleas in this life from my nursery operation and in the ground and everywhere else, landscaping and everywhere else. And I just go after them pretty hard and they flush right back out from it without any problem. I do clean up the material from around them after I'm done and don't give, any insects a place to hide underneath or anything like that. But these just need a bit of a haircut to compensate for the fact that they're not in enough sun. So I'm going to go in here and basically meatball it, and then it'll come back out from that and it won't look like a meatball in a month or two. I've got some birds nesting up in here above my head, I think, in this loropetalum again. I can hear them up in there, but that's it. This is a white flowering one. It just has finished. This will flush back out. The beauty of encore azaleas is it'll bloom again this year. And I'll just control the size. This will be the only pruning it gets this year. The only time you're going to prune these is in the, after the spring flowering. I won't prune it after it's fall flowering. This is autumn bonfire, which is a red, and all I'm doing is taking these pieces that have stretched on the top off of it. That's it. Not much to that, right? We've got azaleas on the front foundation that we're about to remove. That'll be in a piece of content at some point about removing old established plants. I'd like to get enough roots out on them that we can give them away to somebody that wants them. And then I've got autumn fire, which is the dwarf red one down here. And I'm just doing the exact same thing. Just pruning the pieces that are stretched out above the rest of the plant off. Not much to see here. Just looks like I'm being mean to it, but I'm not. If I've got this osmanthus is overhanging it a bit, I cut that back, give it a little bit more room, a little bit more light, and maybe it won't stretch out quite as much. This variegated nandina that's in front of this is about to move, and that placement of that azalea will look a lot better, but we've got a place we're moving this variegated nandina to, so that's it. So any of your super early flowering shrubs, you can prune them now. Any bullies that are come up in the garden right now that are, come back much larger than you had intended them, or they're taking up a much bigger footprint than you want, get those things under control. Sooner the better. The more they put on growth, the more anchored in they're going to be, the harder they're going to be to actually remove. And any limb that's just stretching out someplace that you're eventually going to cut it off, I'll take that off. Just like I went after that osmanthus limb that's laying on top of that azalea, it's gone. The Chinese viburnum over there, I've got some additional work I want to do to turn it into a tree, but I went ahead and removed the limbs that were just in the way of the path and laying up against the fence. And so I'm looking around for anything that just needs to be in general taken off. All this material will go over to our compost pile. It'll be reused in the garden. Nothing gets sent out of here. So there you go. Spring pruning time. Is there anything in your garden you need to get after this spring? Anything that's overgrown? Let us know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching.